and they're going to put an end to his presidency if they drag him into Venezuela. That place is a terrible, terrible mess for us. We can't fix it. We shouldn't try. And she said, if we're liberated by the U.S. armed forces and they remove Maduro, our first act will be to move the Venezuelan embassy to Jerusalem.
When Trump said, Venezuela offered me whatever I wanted, Maduro came begging, offering me whatever I wanted, part of me says, okay, well, obviously Trump is exaggerating here. He probably didn't come begging. But the truth is, I would not be surprised if Maduro came and said, look, let's make a deal, whatever you want. What do you want? Why are you, get off my dick. What do you want? Why are you threatening to invade my country? Why are you threatening to airstrike us? Why are you bombing citizens and fishermen of Trinidad and Tobago, of Colombia, of Venezuela? Why are you doing this? Venezuela is not in any way, shape, or form even close to being the largest drug exporter in Latin America. It actually happens to be the countries which are currently aligned with U.S. foreign policy goals. So if Venezuela is okay with doing business with the U.S. so long as it's fair, it's respectable trade, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? Colonel Douglas Macgregor has an idea as to why we might be doing this. Take a listen to what he has to say.
I don't understand how, our public conversation is so dominated by Hamas, Hezbollah, all these faraway, Ukraine, Russia, these faraway conflicts, groups that are really not connected to the United States and haven't over time posed a meaningful threat to the United States. You're not even allowed to say that. Hamas does not pose a threat to the United States and never has. Why am I more mad about Hamas than I'm mad about the open air drug market in Philadelphia? Why don't any politicians in the Congress put the open air drug market in Philadelphia above the threat of Hamas? What is that?
Well, I think you have an answer of sorts. And it comes, interestingly enough, from Mrs. Machado. I don't know if she's married or not, so I call her Mrs. She may just be Miss Machado. She's the lady that just won the Nobel Peace Prize, and she's from Venezuela. And she said, if we're liberated by the U.S. armed forces and they remove Maduro, our first act will be to move the Venezuelan embassy to Jerusalem.
What does that have to do with...
Nothing. She's also the same woman that wrote a letter to Netanyahu. Public letter. Everyone can read it, by the way. She wrote a letter to Netanyahu. This is the U.S.-backed opposition presidential candidate who just won a Nobel Peace Prize in Venezuela. She wrote a letter to Netanyahu begging Netanyahu to invade and liberate her own country of Venezuela. She also celebrated on numerous occasions the U.S. and Western sanctions on her own country, which starved her own people for many years until Venezuela achieved food sovereignty. Now they produce all the food that they eat in their own country. But she celebrated the starvation of her people. She begged for the invasion of her own country. This is not just like a sick and twisted person. This is a deeply mentally ill person.
Sounds completely confused. Like, what?
Well, you can't be that confused. I think she's hit on something very important. She's figured out where the power lies, and she's playing to the audience that makes the decisions. You're talking about this democracy business. We've always been a republic with limited democracy, but I think we can pretty much conclude that we're ruled now by a small group of extraordinarily wealthy people, billionaire oligarchs. Those are the terms they use in Eastern Europe and places like Ukraine.
Yeah,
I think they're in charge. I think they're calling the shots. And I think there are interests in the oil resources, oil and gas primarily, although, let's face it, they've got gold mines and emerald mines as well, and other things. I'm told they have a lot of lithium.
Most gold. Venezuela has the most gold in all of Latin America. They have the most minerals in all of Latin America. Obviously, these are proven reserves. They have the most proven reserves of oil in the entire world. Obviously, a lot of it is lower grade petroleum, and Venezuela doesn't have the infrastructure to actually extract these minerals, extract this gold, extract a lot of this oil, refine it, do what needs to be done with it. Okay. But this is like one of the richest countries in the world. I don't think we should lose sight of that.
Lithium. There may be a true interest in putting in a puppet government and finding a way to extract these resources, because right now, for the first time in 30 years, all the central banks beyond the borders of the United States around the world hold more gold than we do. That's a very important thing to understand. So how do you begin to reverse this process of managed decline, which is really what we've been on now for the last 25 years? Well, oil is part of it. Oil is gold. And even though the oil is exactly what you described, it's heavy oil, high sulfur content, requires a lot of refining. But still, we have the best oil engineers in the world, especially for deep drilling. it will probably, for the same amount of money we pay for 1 barrel of oil out of the ground in the United States, we could probably get 2 out of Venezuela. It's still not as good as Iran or Libya, where you could probably get 3 barrels out for what we spend to drill in the United States. But it doesn't look like we're going to get control of the Iranian oil fields. And I think we've bullied the Emirates and the Saudis about as much as we can at the moment. And Iran stands defiant. So look for another war in the Middle East while all of this is unfolding, because Israel's objectives aren't met. Neither are the objectives of the New York and London banks. I think we're in a lot of trouble financially, and there's a genuine interest in controlling resources to offset that crisis. President Trump has great instincts, but then he walks into the swamp and he gets mugged early, and people distract him into areas where he's not familiar, and they're going to put an end to his presidency if they drag him into Venezuela. That place is a terrible, terrible mess for us. We can't fix it. We shouldn't try. Let the people that live there do it. And if they say, well, they can't, well, that's their problem. It's their home.
Yeah.
Remember, Venezuela has 1,700 miles of coastline, 1,370-mile border with Colombia, 1,380-mile border with Brazil. And I'm being told by people with experience down there that you've got 100,000 paramilitaries along their border in Brazil and Colombia that are just can't wait to go into Venezuela and fight us if we go into that country. And this sort of thing will spread. It's the last thing that we need. What we need is stability and peace. I would urge the president to reconsider his rejection of this proposal from Maduro.
Colonel Douglas Macgregor, by the way, is like the last great colonel who participated in leading a U.S. tank battle. So if there's anyone who knows about this sort of conflict, what this would actually look like, I mean, you're talking about obviously different setting than where he was fighting, but talk about an amphibious landing on Venezuela, extremely difficult terrain for Caracas in particular. Caracas is surrounded by these massive mountains. On the outskirts of the mountains, on either side of the mountains, you have just massive communities of favelas, okay? Now, why is that going to be difficult? Can you imagine why millions and millions and millions of armed civilian militias, military personnel hiding out with who knows what, drones, artillery, light weaponry in these favelas, as the U.S. is on a one-track road trying to go up a mountainside they did their amphibious landing on the beach, and they have to make it 30-40 minutes up to the mountainside on a 2-lane road as they're trying to climb into Caracas. Oh God, I don't even want to think about what those videos are going to look like. I think that the U.S. is going to try to do these decapitation strikes on all the senior leadership, political, military, and what have you. Then they're going to try to do this. I don't think it's going to be a walk in the park. I do think that Venezuela has not only created a failsafe for the destruction of an attempted U.S. invasion, a possible U.S. invasion after these decapitation strikes would take place. I think they're very well prepared for that. But also, this is the biggest part of all that I want to stress. I think Venezuela has prepared a scenario for an extended, I mean, decade-long potential guerrilla conflict, Vietnam style, to wage war against any invading personnel from the United States, even if they do these decapitation strikes, they invade, whatever it may be. I think Venezuela has a fail-safe plan to create so much chaos, such a headache for the United States, that even after decades of potential investment in a conflict of this nature, the U.S. would be forced to pull out. I think that invading Venezuela is just going to mobilize and unite the Latin American anti-imperialists in every country that right now, they've taken some beatings. In Peru, for example, there was a coup against the government of Pedro Castillo by his own, I believe, his foreign minister and his vice president. They couped him. He was in a very weak position. He had a coalition government. Pedro Castillo, former teacher, he was an anti-imperialist. Okay, socialist, forced out of power in a coup. In Bolivia, you had the division of the left anti-imperialist movement, the socialist movement in Bolivia between Evo Morales and between Luis Arce, the former president, and the current president. They divided the movement, and now you have this pro-U.S. State Department prototype AI, candidate that came out. And well, they're very ready to take the reins and secure good relations with Washington, D.C. And Lula's place, Lula is not the Lula of yesteryear. Lula is now Lula da Silva in Brazil. It was even admitted by Bernie Sanders that the CIA helped temper the protests when Lula won to ensure that his ascendance to power was cleared from any sort of obfuscation or intrusions by the Bolsonaro wing of the country. Bolsonaro, I also don't like, and I don't think that he was serving the interests of the Brazilian people, but I do think that Bolsonaro in some ways was bucking the interests of the U.S., so he was not fully in one camp or another. Very interesting. He came in talking a lot of game against China in support of the U.S., but by the end of his administration, he had kind of tilted on that question. You look at what else we have. Argentina. Don't even get me started. I mean, yes, they just won the elections again. Milei won the elections, but that was a complete sham election, fraudulent elections. And I think that an invasion of Venezuela would hurt the presidency of Milei. I think it would only unite and inspire and strengthen the positions of more anti-imperialist coalitions in the country. That being said, they're not that strong. They're more like Lula-type candidates and parties that reign in the Argentinian anti-U.S. camp. As for Mexico, I mean, the leadership of Claudia Sheinbaum and her predecessor, AMLO, I mean, that is extremely strong. I don't even think it can get stronger. Even the majority of the top 4 alternative parties in Mexico right now all support, the majority of voters in each of those parties, they all support Claudia Sheinbaum. And she's doing a pretty fantastic job, I'll say. She's limited in what she can do. She's on the border of the United States, okay, but she's done a pretty terrific job. AMLO did a terrific job before her. I like AMLO more than I like Claudia Sheinbaum, but there you go. What other countries do we have? We have Colombia. That goes without saying. I think this is going to strengthen Gustavo Petro's presidency. He's in his first term. I think this is going to strengthen his presidency. If they try to invade Venezuela, they do these threats. They sanction Gustavo Petro already. I mean, this is just a completely insane and pointless, and it's going to backfire in ways that are unthinkable for us even right now. So I strongly condemn this. I think this is a terrible idea, and I think it's going to, for a guy who is so invested in what his legacy is, I think that Donald Trump is going to drive the final nuclear bomb into his own legacy, and he's going to do that with Venezuela if he makes a move.